O'clock, and I'd like to welcome everybody here and for this budget session. So who wants to start us off?
I'll start the ball rolling. We do have a PowerPoint presentation for you, and there's lots of slides and there's lots of words. This isn't just for you. This is for people who can read it later or see it later and kind of have some context of what we're talking about. So we're not going to read from the slides. We're just kind of go through that. That's just kind of our outline.
Is that the same thing on here? Because this is what I've been looking at.
Do we have these?
I don't think we've sent those to you yet.
I thought, oh, not the slides. You just had
no.
the numbers. That's
Yes.
it.
Yes.
We've given you
Yep.
the little tiny stuff that's hard to see.
Yeah, I did have made copies of these sheets, and they're all new from what you've been given before, so keep these and pitch the others.
Okay.
We just want to kind of remind you, in last year's budget, the discussions ended with the need for the 8 mil increase after we had cut $526,000 from the proposed increases. And we thought there might be a potential for another mill increase this year. That's where we ended last year's budget. The outlook now, we're starting to see some revenue growth, and government bodies tax in arrears, so seeing the return can be delayed often. And so we're seeing revenues increase in sales tax, franchise fees, license and permit fees. And, you know, while the inflation grew so fast, revenues did not. But now we're seeing those revenues. So it's coming up. Also, as you know, property valuations increased 10%, 10.01%. So that was good news. Our assessed valuation this year was $154,332,386. We have to take the TIF and the RHID valuations off that. And so it ended up with each mill at $152,886. Last year's meal was $138,695 or something like that. So we've come up about $13,000 each meal. When we were sent the evaluation from the county clerk, he also sends our revenue neutral rate. On this slide, if you look on the left-hand side, this is our original mill levy rate that we received last year. And that is what our taxes are being paid off for this year. What he's saying, because they take the mill we had last year, but they use the assessed valuation of this year.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Anytime.
It would be a lot helpful if we had these slides so that we could make our notes on these slides as we're having this discussion. Can we get those done real quick?
Yeah.
Sure.
I have 2 sets here. I can give you these. I printed one.
We'll get you some more here.
Sorry, we hand out so much paper, sometimes we try to be thoughtful, and we didn't think about that.
Yeah, you're going too fast for us to actually take decent notes. So.
Okay, tell me to slow down.
I think he's
It's nice if you're trying to save money on paper when we're talking about a budget.
Well, if we had it in electronic, then we could, but.
We're going to lose our Tree City status.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, I can forward them.
Yeah, you could,
Okay.
I can email you a digital version.
right now,
Yeah.
as well. What, on the right-hand side is what you're seeing is our revenue neutral rate that has been set for us by the county clerk using this year's valuation with last year's tax dollars. So this is what our revenue neutral rate is. It's a loss of 5.162 mills, or $789,198. This is if you don't take your valuation increase, you stay with your old tax dollars, so you just lose that on your increase all the way through. This is why most cities go with and exceed the revenue neutral rate and just keep it with they may not raise their mills, they keep the same mills, but they at least get their increase in their valuation.
And while we're waiting, if I may, Donna, I'll just make maybe an aside comment. Remember that we levy on behalf of the library as well. So they are their own entity, but we levy on behalf of them, and that goes into our general fund. So remember, if we go with an original mill versus the revenue neutral rate mill, it's not just us that takes that hit. It is the airport, because they're an enterprise fund, the library, bond and interest, those kinds of things. And remember, the library is particularly important right now because we're getting ready to issue a new bond issue for the new building. And so I think it's imperative that we keep that in mind, that they really need to capture this additional revenue without raising the actual mill levy, but just the increase in valuation to help make those bond payments that they are obligated to us to make to help offset our costs on that. So that might be something worth noting. Like I said, I know you guys know that we've talked about it, but for somebody who might be watching this later, I think that would be important to know.
And what's the day when we have to post a public hearing for this?
We have to turn in a notice to the county clerk that we are going to exceed the revenue neutral rate by July 20th.
Okay.
Our meeting that we have before that is July 11th. So it will be July 11th that you need to make that decision.
And we have some dates held on your schedule if you wanted to do another couple budget work sessions after this. It's completely up to you. Today is just kind of the 30,000-foot overview, so you guys can have some time to ponder and cipher on things and see like what are the best next steps overall. Thank you, Rebecca. And since we just got these numbers the other day as well, and also remember that although we got this number from the county as far as the valuation, remember it won't be quote unquote final until
November 1st.
And so there's always this, there could be a slight adjustment up or down either way. I mean, they're really good. They're really close. They're confident on their numbers, but it's still just keep that in mind. It can fluctuate just slightly between now and November, which is challenging.
Okay, I emailed you the slides, and you all have a paper copy.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
are you great?
So we're ready for slide number 6.
Okay.
So we're going to put 4 options in front of you today, just so you know what choices you have to make. The first option would be to no mill increase and to just keep the R&R the way the county clerk has figured it. So that would be a loss, as I said, $789,000. And I've listed the losses, like general would lose $600,000, airport would lose $7,000, library would lose $62,000, special liability would lose $4,000, and bond and interest would lose $112,000 if we did that. Because this is not just about the general fund, this is all these 5 property tax funds.
And to my comment just a minute ago about the library, remember that they're obligated to pay us an additional $65,000 a year towards that bond payment. So that's a significant portion of that that they would have to figure out what else to cut if this was going to be the option you took. So just have that on your radar.
The next slide would be option 2, and this is no mill increase, and you would exceed the R&R, but you would keep the same mill levy that we had, 70.383. And this changes a little bit after the decimal point at November, because they'll go up or down to get the same monies we were going to get. So it's always a little bit different. I think we ended last year with 70.506, but the dollars came in just a little bit higher, so now it's 70.383. So we'll still be at the 70 mil mark. And that would give us our gain of $789,000 and broken down into each of those funds like I just described. Now the third option, and we'll talk about this in length further, but the third option, no mill increase, we would exceed the R&R and keep our 70.383 mills, but we would transfer 3 mills from bond and interest to the general fund. So our mill levy would stay the same, but those 2 funds would be different by 3 mills.
And she's got more slides to show why that
And
might
what?
be important.
I will explain that later, yes. But that would give another general fund gain of $458,000. And then the fourth option is just because we talked about this last year and stuff, how we might want to grow little bits instead of a lot. We also threw this one in about 1 mill increase, exceed the revenue neutral rate and go up to 7.1 70.383 mils. And that would give us a gain of $942,000 spread through those. What we did was just put it in the general fund here, but it could go into the bond and interest or wherever we needed that one extra mil. So the next one is on your big sheet, and it's your first one with the blue heading.
This is my favorite slide. Favorite spreadsheet. Because I think so much we focus on the general fund, and us and the public sometimes don't realize that that mill is made up of all these different funds. And so down at the bottom, Donna's showing you in gray, the row right above the gray shows the mill levy. This is assuming
No
Which
growth, no
option?
changes. This is that we exceed the revenue neutral rate, but keep our 70.383 mils.
but then shows what we've got in each of those funds to make up that mill. I think this makes it simple to see and understand.
Well, this is the forecast for the next 5 years. So you can see, you look at the ending balance, the bar in kind of the goldy green color that is 24, and we would end with 4,014,000 as an ending balance. And then it goes down from there, and you can kind of see how we kind of just start going down without, if we don't do anything. And this does assume a 1 or 2% increase in the valuation, and it does assume all the increases in the expenditures, like we've always done in our forecasting. Next, we're going to just focus on the general fund, so as not to confuse everyone. I went through the general fund, and I have my big spreadsheet that I'll show you later how we got here. But I wanted to let you know that I did go ahead and do some maneuvering, might say, of different things that would help the general fund and not hurt other funds. We have one of the property tax funds is a special liability fund. And this is put aside for liability insurance for cities and to pay tort claims and stuff that comes against an employee. Like if there was something for the police, this is where the deductible for the police insurance would come from, if they had a case against us and someone because of liability, that kind of thing. So I've asked Chris if we might be able to move the cyber liability insurance over to that fund. And so I've moved $30,000 in '23, and I plan to do $31,000, the premium for cyber insurance in '24 as well, and have it paid out of special liability. There's enough money in there to capture that. So that helps the general fund by $60,000 total. And then we reduced consultant technical services in fire by $70,000. We deferred hiring 2 positions, one in fire and one in police, for $173,000. We moved our payments for health ministry and for the chamber into where we thought was more appropriate was the EcoDevo fund, as that is for economic development and to help our city. And then we've also reduced the demolition funds for '23 by $25,000, that transfer that we usually put over there by $25,000. So these cuts for 2023, this totaled $368,462 that I've cut out of the '23 budget to help us come in a little bit stronger.
And this is current, this is
What I have done,
currently not the cuts that we made last year.
This
to
is in
this year's
addition
budget.
to.
In addition to the
Yeah.
five
In
hundred and
addition to.
twenty-six thousand
Right.
that we
Right.
already cut out.
yes, yes. Now, for '24, we have made these other assumptions to save money in the general fund as well. I plan the community development salaries, which are economic development driven. That's what they're for. We're going to take them out of EcoDevo and kind of reimburse the general fund for a 1.5 position right now that's comes out of the general fund in community development.
Can you, as I was looking at that, would you refresh my memory, please? I'm sure the others already have this. Could you just specify who is who with community development and historic preservation, because it said 30%? And I know we've talked about this, but I didn't do due diligence to actually write that down. So,
Zach McHatton
okay.
Yeah, so.
is the community development director.
And
And then we have Leah, who is
The management analyst.
analyst who's paid out of their 30%.
30%, yeah, and she also helps staff Main Street Historic Preservation and also admin, so that's why her salary is kind of split out differently.
so she's the 30%.
Yes.
The rest of her salary comes from admin.
Okay, and Zach is 100%. Okay,
Yes.
okay. Leah, I thought there was somebody named Leah in the legal department.
She moved.
Yep, same Leah, just different position.
She wanted a new challenge, and
Okay,
so.
all right, I just wrote that down to ask that question. So.
Yep.
We've also continued to keep Health Ministries and Chamber coming out of the Eco Development Fund. And the good news is, the 24 is going to be our last debt service payment for the golf course from general. And we only need $275,000 instead of the $600,000 we usually get. So that, I'm sorry, we need $325,000, so I can reduce it by $275,000. And next year, it will be zero.
Well, we say that, but full disclosure, we know that there are going to have to be improvements made at the course because the bonds paying off means the course is 20 years old. And so we will have to reallocate some of those funds back into the course. We know that. And as well, some of those will be going to pay for the newly incurred library bond indebtedness in the future. But remember that golf course stuff, it wasn't in the bond and interest fund for whatever reason. Long before our times here, it was coming out of the admin budget for whatever reason. So when we go forward, we're trying to keep all the bonds in the bond fund so that it's easier to track. So I'm sure there was a reason for it. So
And I saw the mayor get excited eyes, so.
No, I mean, we've already talked about that. Out of that, we need to allocate whatever we decide, but it would be prudent to allocate at least.
Absolutely.
At least 100,000 a year back into capital improvements for the Sand Creek.
Right. No, my point was, she did say the general fund payment stops. 24 is the last year, but then there's still the dollars that you have to carry to make a payment. So the bonds don't actually pay off till 2025.
Yeah.
That's the point. And it just didn't want you to
But we
be
have it in a
repeating
reserve
that
fund.
it pays off in 24,
Yeah.
because it is.
The money's sitting out there for the final.
Yeah.
Exactly.
in a reserve fund, basically.
Yes. We've also reduced Safe Hope by $16,000, and we reduced the senior center by $5,000. So meaning we've taken it all out of general. We're not going to be paying them at all because we've stopped or paying senior center $5,000 this year. Next year it will go to none or zero, and then Safe Hope. We didn't realize that it's been in there all these years, and they haven't really had to account for the way they're using it or anything. It was started like in 15 or 16.
I don't know. I'm
And
speaking for my. It was,
so-
my understanding, looking back at the history, was it, excuse me. My understanding, looking back at the history again before our time, was it was supposed to be a one-time grant for a specific project at Safe Hope. And then somehow it just kind of kept carrying over year to year. And they haven't been submitting business plans, audits, nothing. And so our proposal is there's no reason for us to continue to fund it. We have to take care of our house first. I mean, they're doing a great service, but they have other funding mechanisms.
And then, again, we'd pay the 24 cyber liability insurance from special liability. So all these assumptions for 2024 would come to 576,723. So that would come out of the general fund. So then you go to this sheet, the big one. And at the top, it says maintain 53.711 mils. Kind of in the middle of the big sheet. And this is where I kind of lay it all out for you. I've tried to make it easy to understand, but everybody's mind works a little different. So we'll see how good I did. This is the sheet I usually give you. It shows 21 actual, 22 actual, so you have some kind of reference of the past. I put in here the 23 adopted, so you can see what we ended up with last year. And then I have updated the 23 with these new cuts that we've been talking about. And I've updated, if you look under additions here in the center of the page, there's revenue for 2023. And I'm looking at the increased amounts we got in '22 and how they're coming in '23. So I'm making these assumptions that our sales tax will increase at least 200,000. It will probably be more. So I'm saying at least 100,000 per 1% sales tax that we have. I think it will go more, but I don't want to be overzealous about what we think. Of course, I increased our idle funds we already have about 400,000 in there, so I went up to 400,000. The court fines and fees are not coming in as they were, so I have decreased them 100 to be cautious. And then Suzanne has looked at all the licenses and permits and the charges for services and has seen what's came in already this year and what's going to come in the rest of this year. And so we have increased those two things on how we think that will come in. And then the reductions, of course, what I went over my last slide. So I think that we will end up with just losing about $500,000. This is if we spend most of our budget authority. And last year we came in about 98%. We used to be around 93, but the expenses and stuff, and we've brought those contingencies down to where they're just about nil. So we usually use a lot of our budget authority, most of it. So, but I still think we're going to have, I'm hoping, about 14% reserve at the end with all these things we've done. Did you all get my notice about the S&P rating? That was good news. Very good news. But you did see in there that she is very cautious about that, and we could go down. Because I know she was nervous about it last year, but she kept it there this year too, so we're good. Because this is exactly what I told her in really fast talk.
Remember you saying that.
And then I've done the same thing for '24. I've upped, and you can see what I've upped. I've increased sales tax more. Franchise fees are coming in '22, they came in almost 200,000 more. So I'm increasing those. And then once again, I had Suzanne look at the license and permits and charges for services, and we think they're going to go up that much. So keeping it all in all just like this, I think '24 will end, my best guess is 12% reserve. Now,
If we were the federal government, we would say that's a deficit reduction, which is a good thing.
yeah, we don't like to say deficit, though, do we? The next one, the same big sheet, is if we would transfer 3 mills from the bond and interest fund to the general fund. Now, you're saying, why are you going to do that? When we were doing the '23 budget back in '22, early '22, we thought we were going to bond in '22, so we had another $300,000 or $400,000 bond payment in '24 or in '23. And then we were looking at maybe the library being done, and I would have to bond for that and have a payment for that in '24. So we were trying to build up that cash. Well, neither of those two things have happened yet. So we have a larger balance, a larger reserve in there than we thought we would. So I'm going to show you some forecast of what would happen to our bond and interest fund if we move that over and built up the general fund. We would have to then, in 2 or 3 years, build up the bond and interest fund. So it's back and forth. It's going to have to go up one of these places. But I wanted you to look at that. But everything is the same here. It just shows that we would end with 14% reserve in 2024.
And that's because you've shifted over
The
3
3 mills.
mills from bond and interest to this.
Right.
That's 3 mills at the 150.
Yes.
464,000 or something like that. Mhm.
Yeah, so the overall mill levy still stays exactly the same. we're capturing the increased valuation, but we're transferring the mills that were previously allocated to the bond and interest fund and sending them back to general fund for at least a couple of years.
And if you remember, I think it was 18, we moved 5 mills from general over to bond and interest. And I have moved 2 or 3 back one other time. So we're just kind of giving the general back what it had at that point.
Yeah.
But this is something you can do. You can move them back and forth as you need. So. Is there any questions on that before we move on?
Well, so I was taking notes when I was looking at this stuff, and I just have, starting out with a question for fire and EMS. So, in your notes on what was here for us to look at, you had, if we didn't fill the one position that was still not filled and took that out of the budget, you commented that, and I don't have everything down here, but something about that would not be according to the NFPA guidelines, the requirements, and then where's the other one? ISO, which I looked that up too. So I basically looked these 2 organizations up to see how they, I'm assuming by what you tell us that they impact the insurance. Okay. So you said we weren't meeting that guideline with the NFPA by still not having the required number of people on board. I'm just concerned about why we would consider taking that position out of the budget when you are already not meeting the NFPA. Does that make sense? You had it in the budget for last year. It's in the budget.
Correct.
So how does that impact it even worse, I guess, by not
I do want
filling
to make
that
a
position?
clarification, though. The 24 budget still has that guy in it. We did not hire in 23 because we
Right.
did not know what 24 was going to
But you're
happen.
talking about removing that, right, as a cut?
No, it's been removed from 23, but 24 has it in it. That's what we're going to talk
Okay.
at the very end.
Okay.
If
Okay,
we,
then I'm
those were cuts we brought to you during the utility rate sessions. You know, we talked about this.
Okay.
So we're going to bring that back around, but it is not out
Okay.
of the 24. But we couldn't hire this year because we weren't
So-
sure what was going to happen in 24, and those 2 spots were empty
So you reflected those cuts here
in 23.
in 23,
But they are in, the cuts are not in 24.
so you're not really cutting the position then?
That's up to you guys at the end.
We've left it vacant.
Deferred it.
That's a better word.
You don't have it filled, but you're
Yeah,
planning to
it's in-
fill it because it's in the 24. Okay.
And if you look at the sheet that she's given you here, she shows reductions. And then it shows expenses for 2023. And you'll see
Yes.
it's listed there. But then you look at expenses for 2024. Those are the reductions that are included. And those positions
Are
aren't.
not there yet. But we're talking about that later. These
Yeah.
there still can
Okay.
be added because we did talk about that. But
'Cause
I wanted you to have.
I'm thinking 2024 when we were working on that budget is what I'm thinking, I guess. So,
And we were
That's-
partially because when those discussions occurred, that was part of the utility fund discussions.
And that was
And-
whether we would transfer the 570,000 or not from water.
okay.
And we've got
Yeah, right,
some of that
right.
here, just further down in the slides.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. The next 2 pages are just the general fund forecast by itself, just to give you an idea of what it looks like as you go further out in the next few years. And what I have done with it is the bottom, there's a blue band, and I have left the ending balance, and you can see in 24, it's 2,000,008, and then it goes down. By 27, it's 653,000. And that is at a 3% of our reserve. So we know we can't do that. But what I did was go to the bottom and say, to keep it up kind of close, if we wanted to stay at a 14% in 24, we'd have to go up to 56, which is moving those 3. We could move those 3 mills over to make it 56 or whatever. And then we have to go up to like maybe 59 if nothing changes to get it at a 15% in 27. I've just kind of put that there just so you can see the two and what's happening. And sometimes it's hard to realize what might be if you don't have it in front of you. And the next one is just shows that 3% or the 3 mills put in from the bonded interest and what it looks like. We go down to a 10% in 27 with those 3 mills in there, but it still ends up having to be like 59 mills or something. But that's what those two are, just to kind of help you see that.
And Donna, correct me if I misstate this, but that assumes a 2% valuation increase annually in the outer years, because historically, that's what we've seen is 2, sometimes 3% on a good year. So this is a huge anomaly as the market catches up in the last several years. So
Well, it's kind of it was done by that professor at WSU.
Right.
He takes the past and goes with a slope thing and however he did it. But it does increase each year.
yeah,
What?
yeah. So we're assuming there's going to be an increase in valuation to get to this level.
And we've also put in there like 5% annual increases in
Commodities.
payroll. And then I go by it's not the CPI, but it's the one for the government entities.
Municipal, yeah, municipal index.
Index rate, and those go up, expenses go up. The only thing it doesn't have is human intervention in there to do or not do something. So it just kind of just puts it out there in the worst case all the way down. But it just gives you an idea.
Ready for the next?
Okay, ready for the- Okay, now we're going to switch gears and get out of general and go to the bond and interest discussion. And this is just, I'm just re-saying that it has a larger balance because of the bond issues that were delayed. We could spend that down, or not spend it down, we would spend down the reserve over the next few years if we transfer the 3 mills. Right?
Just making sure I'm staying
Yep,
with you.
you're right. So this is our forecast for bond and interest. And this one, you've asked for 10 years out, which is kind of hard to foresee that far in the future, but we kind of know what CIP we want to do for those times. So I have taken her CIP list and put what it would take each year for debt payments, and it's all kind of evolved into this.
That's what you received in your agenda packet in the last meeting agenda.
And I put new ones in here with the increased valuation.
And remember, like we said the other day, that's a living document because there are things that either we're depending on either a KDOT grant funding for or a cost share program or the CCLIP funding. And if we don't get it or we get more, we get less, that all gets adjusted into. Or like, when we budgeted to build the pool 10 years ago, obviously that didn't come into effect till a long time later. So we try to take everything into account. That way we'd rather under promise and over deliver always, so we just want to make sure that we're trying to be fiscally responsible for those projects that are upcoming that we know. And some of those are optional and some of them are going to be necessary, like the rebuild of Spencer and things like that.
What we tried to do though in this set was put things that we knew were going to happen.
Yeah.
And tried to position them in the years we believe they really will occur.
And we have the
Understanding
time
there's
to-
going to be stuff that comes up that we don't know about, but because a lot of things are development driven, but this is the best educated guess that we have right now.
And Suzanne took into account, how much can we actually get done in 1 year? We can't have 15 projects if there's not the people there to do it or something, so you have to take that into consideration too. So what this shows is if we maintain the current 10.049 mill levy, we would have a ending reserve of $2 million at the end of 2024, which is a lot higher than our 5% policy. But it is building up for the future. We know we have all these things coming. Some people don't like us to have that large of a reserve, so if we could use it for something else, there's, everybody thinks differently on how much reserve a city should have. So, but if we keep this same mill levy, it looks like we can keep it clear out to maybe 29 before we have to go back up another 3.
For the bond and interest
For the bond and
section
interest
only.
only, right. Because of all the new projects we have coming in. And you can kind of see that at the bottom, it has that blue bar again. You can see where we start running into a negative amount in 29, and what we would have to do to keep it at our 5% rate. or percentage, according to policy. Now, the second sheet is just like this one, except I have moved 3 mills in 2024 out of here to the general fund. And it is good until about 26, when we would probably have to ramp it up about 3 mills. And it's interesting that both of the blue bands end in the later years at 15. So it's kind of funny, they're consistent that way. No matter where you start, you're going to end up that same spot with what projects we have in here.
You mean 15 mils
15 mills.
for bond and interest?
Do you have any questions? Okay. The next, to get out of this discussion, we're going to start, I'm going to have some other people chime in and discuss some things about budget cut options and revenue preservation. We have, this is the previous cuts we had discussed during our utility rate discussions. We had thought maybe we could reduce the demolition funds, 15,000 in '24. We could continue the reduction of 1 police officer and 1 firefighter. We could reduce engineering technical consultant fees by 25,000. Then we had the street overlay and the slurry seal in there for a total of 150,000. And then we even took out the picnic tables for 25. So this all comes to 393,184 in additional cuts.
These are additional cuts to what we've already
These are
proposed.
These are-
not included.
And these are not included in 24. We just want to make sure we remembered you guys saying that and we talking about them. So we want to just put them up here for your remembrance.
A lot of work has gone into what you've brought us today, and I appreciate that. That's not easy to pull all these together and to think, try and think like anybody would think, get into our minds and anticipate our questions and everything. I guess my question is, a valuation increase is good for the city, but it's also bad for our residents, and they're already feeling increases at the stores and all their other bills and everything. So I want to understand the staff does not believe that they're necessary at this time response, because we don't have a middle ground being brought in front of us. We have a keep the revenue neutral option, and we have a take all of the new assessed value option. We don't have anything in between.
I guess I kind of feel this is the in-between because we've taken so much out already. Maybe I should have left everything in and showed you how, but that's the budget. It was 9% we would end up with as a reserve. So I guess I felt like this was the middle ground.
Okay. So,
But I want help with where you want to go with these other things. You need to tell us where we go. All this is on the table for you to discuss. Well, let's keep going.
Yeah, keep going. Excuse me.
The effects of these cuts, you want to talk about some of those?
Sure. Of the list that we said was not included but could be added, the effects of those cuts for, say, reducing the demolition, then that means we're not going to be able to handle property cleanups or demolition of properties that are not taking care of themselves. Also, moving items to be paid by economic development would leave less funds for other activities and incentives because we're by paying for some of the salaries and things out of there. The technical assistance reductions would result in fewer projects getting done because that gets used for surveys and things like that at the beginning of projects. Reducing street maintenance would obviously reduce the quality of the roadways. And then deferring hiring fire and police would have a reduction in all of their services. Then we provided some proposals for preserving revenues as well. And we talked about some of these definitely during the utility rate discussions. We talked about increasing building permit fees. And remember, we provided you with the information for how we compared to other cities. And I believe your comments where we looked at a 15 versus a 20% increase, and you'd said 15 would be what you would likely support. And that would be an additional $29,000 per year. That's based on 2022 construction, but knowing that things may not be exactly the same in 23, 24. Then also, we talked about developing an economic development policy that considers our financial health before we offered incentives, and that's in the works. Eliminate reductions and waivers of permit fees. We talked about that too. Because every time we reduce those, then that's a piece of the revenue that's at the top of all these spreadsheets that Donna provides. And eliminating brokerage fees on city land sales. Updating city policies regarding payment for infrastructure for development, like intersection paving, and eliminating city contributions to those. Because typically, right now, our policy is like in a subdivision, the city at large pays for the intersection costs. Then just a little bit of information about tax abatements as well. Remember, 30% of Newton properties are property tax exempt, and most of those exemptions, remember, we can't control. City and EDC staff are also working on development policy that would identify our best ROI. Again, some of these pieces, we don't know when somebody's going to come and want to develop here, but what we're going to provide to the project, definitely we can't control. And then we've talked some about the neighborhood revitalization program, and it's a tiered incentive program. It encourages development. Right now, our boundaries are pretty wide, and maybe we want to put some stipulations on that. Maybe we want to suck it back in more for the core area of the city, or maybe it's something that we want to take out of the option list and say, hey, maybe we don't want that program anymore. I don't know. That's a decision for you all to make, but it's definitely something that's on the table.
And recall that the NRP, although it applies to a wide area of the city, there are different tiers for it. So if you're in the C3 district in downtown, it's like 100% abatement for 10 years, or it can be up to that. And if you're in other areas of town, commercial and industrial properties can be abated for 5 years, or it could be on a tiered basis. Residential new construction versus rehab is also 5 years on a tiered abatement. So you could structure the program any way you wanted. We could just reduce the area overall. You could say, well, we don't want to do 10 years anymore. We only need to do 5 and do like 180, 50, tier it down for 5 years. We could say we only want to do residential. That agreement is due to be updated again anyway soon. It's needed to be updated for a couple of years. So that would just be something to consider, because it does affect a substantial portion of the city. Rebecca, 47% of the city? Or something like that, is covered by the NRP area. So it's pretty substantial.
Big area.
Yeah, it is. Well, 47% of our housing
Okay.
is in the neighborhood revitalization program area. Now, much of that housing is a lot older, but again, to Suzanne's point on this, we do include industrial and commercial as part of that policy. So as we look at an overall economic development policy, this is just a piece of it we're taking in. We usually provide you every year with an updated spreadsheet of how those things are rolling off. We're finalizing that this week. Part of it is how the program works, again, that we're looking at, and we always report back to you. We rebate the costs, the actual costs that they give us through their permitting, but we also keep their initial tax level down, and we use that difference to use the rebate. So it's very similar to like an RHID or something like to that vein. But on some of these, like I said, we rebated right over $72,000, but we actually have almost $300 of assessed valuation that's not being included because of that property valuation being held lower, especially for some of our commercial properties that are included. Just, again, something for us to look at as we look at all of the policies. We've been into discussions with Beth with that EDC, and she's asked that we start crafting a policy that's similar to the county and to our other cities in the county to keep us all in a very similar situation, especially when she brings developers around, that they can kind of accept something similar and the policies coordinate and read well together. There's also other best practices we will look at to consider about a return on investment rate of at least 1.3, which is the International Development recommendation, but she'll help us to continue to bring something to you on that.
And then the commission also grants abatements to industrial locations with IRBs and other types of exemptions. And those abated properties have a total valuation, what's on the books now, of about 8.7 million. Now, that sounds like a pretty big number, but we boiled it down to approximately
4,000 worth of money we would actually get. Now, the next steps, we've kind of laid it out, what we need from you. Do we meet or exceed the revenue neutral rate? Do we transfer the funds from bond and interest to general? Do we make any other reductions? Do we consider a mill? And we can set another additional budget session after you guys kind of percolate all this. And then the last slide we've included is the proposed budget timeline. This is where July 11th comes in, that we have to have what we're going to do for the revenue neutral rate, and then we'll get that posted. And then August 8th is when we have to set our not to exceed budget for publication so that we can make all our hearing deadlines. And it all comes together on August 22nd. We have longer according to the law, but this is how the city has always done it, and we'd like to maintain it that way.
I was going to ask on the transfer from the bond and interest, if we transfer it, are we going to have a deficit later in a year or two from now for the payments for the library and any golf course improvements? So
Probably about 3 years is our guess.
in 3 years, we
Yeah,
would need to
we would
make
have to
those
basically
funds up
transfer
somehow
those mills back if general fund was doing okay.
Or raise
the mill levy overall,
to
one of the two.
put that back. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So I don't really like doing that now. I would rather find another way to find the money if we had to. Just for that reason, I feel like we've sort of worked ourselves out of a hole. I feel like we're only setting ourselves up for another hole in 3 years from now, so.
It could be, and part of that, sir, to your point, depends on the valuation increase over those years too. You know, it's.
That's what we're betting on.
Yeah.
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 And I think exceeding the revenue neutral rate just seems, I mean, that seems like a no-brainer. but
Yeah, I would say surely the
Yeah.
5 of us could agree on that.
And that keeps
just
the
to
mill
start.
levy stable and doesn't change the actual mill levy rate
Yeah.
for our portion of it. I can't speak to the other taxing entities, of course.
I just want to hear from you that you want to keep that balance in there growing, and that's fine.
So is there you would think 4th year now I would have this figured out. I don't. Is there a mill increase needed if we don't transfer from the bond and interest to the general fund? Do we need to raise it by 3 mills?
The general fund?
Yeah.
In the ones I've given you here, we are not raising it at this time.
I think that would be where those cuts would come in.
When I think we will end up at, what did I say, 12%.
Okay.
So that's getting a little,
If
that's
there
what they
was
don't want.
So if there was a 2 to 3 mil increase in addition, because I'm also think I'll support the 1 mil increase to prepare for the future. So if there was a 3 to 4 mil increase overall and 1 mil of that went to the bond and interest, then
I think our proposal was 1 mil would stay in the general fund to not have to transfer
Yeah,
the 3.
we'd leave the,
Am I saying that right?
yeah, the
Yes.
bond and interest would stay the same then.
well, I'm saying, okay, an increase in the mill to keep us from having to make some of those other cuts, because I do sort of agree with Kathy about the 1 police and 1 fire. I've heard for 3.5 years that our police are down, our fire's down. And if we can just commit to it now and just say, we're not gonna wait any longer, let's fill them, then, and would think to a certain degree too, while I liked not raising the taxes for so many years, that those small things was what we heard. The small 2 to 3 mil increase every year is better than a 8 mil all at once. So that's what I'm saying is
Well, you
the
can-
1 mil in there to keep for future bond and interest needs. I like that. We're planning for the future, but then also an additional 2 to 3 mil increase just to not have to make some of those cuts if we don't have to make all of them. So,
Okay.
which I know may be surprising coming from me, but I'm also not running again.
I had to kind of,
So if you look at this, the 14th slide, I've got it up on the screen here, that shows the general fund and then shows you the percentages that Donna's talking about there.
And this would be without the transfer from
Right,
bond and
without the
interest.
transfer.
but
So this is just, but it is with the increased valuation, but keeping the mill levy stable, but not the transfer. So to your point, so that would be the, I
That
think,
would be the 12%
reserve out of the 15 that we're supposed to
Yeah.
maintain.
and then if you want, if you could just look at this one, then if you wanted to add 1 or 2 mils, it would go up from there.
I mean, I think it just makes sense. The city's growing. And I mean, you drive down Kansas and there's one house that has a roof on it now, and there's a second one that's getting ready to have a roof start going on it. And it was like I go to bed one night and I wake up the next day and there's a house. So
It's amazing how fast they can put them up.
crazy.
They-
And
they can
maybe I
put 'em
just don't
up.
look every day I drive by, or sometimes I go up to 50, but to get on the highway, but it's, yeah. I mean, and if they're doing it this fast, what is it going to be like before even the end of this year? I mean, there's going to be so many more, so.
Well, and think about, to your point, Sand Creek Station, we've got. I
Yeah,
think
and
it's
that's, I don't even go over
15,
there and see that.
13 to 15 going up.
I mean, this is just in that little Ron Harder development south of the fire station.
Yep, and then you got Fox Ridge, who is
Fox Ridge and we-
chomping at the bit to
yeah.
go as soon as the state will give us approval
To put
for
it-
their specials, so.
To put it in some context, you're not, if we cut the fire police for 24, it's about 170-some thousand dollars. A mil is 152.
it would
So
almost be
one mil would almost cover those 2 positions.
I don't think one's enough, though. I mean, that's, again, shocking.
I know I'm sitting here going,
Yeah.
I don't mean that disrespectfully.
No, I
But
joke
the
about it, too.
economy has changed so much, to your point, sir. I mean,
With the 1 mil in the bond and interest, I would still like to see maybe another 3 mils, maybe a 3 to 4 mil increase total. I don't know, 2 to 3 mils for the general.
we
is
can
what I'm
sure
saying.
bring you what that would look like, for
Yeah.
sure. We can get you some of those
Yep.
things. And that's why we figured you guys would want to have another meeting after this. We just wanted to get your initial thoughts and
Yeah.
what do you want to see from us? And then we can give you those proposals so you can make some educated decisions.
Yeah.
I think that home values are gonna level off. So our valuation increase is gonna have to be with new commercial and residential properties. And the hard thing is like, a $250,000 house, that taxes may be $4,000, but we only get, what, $1,300 of that?
Yeah, typically about 29 to 30% is what we get.
The city, yeah.
Yeah,
So
versus
it-
the school
it-
district is usually just because they have a larger footprint.
Yeah.
And then the remaining goes to the county, the township, and the state.
And even this 10.1, that includes new stuff that went on both commercially and residential.
In 22, yeah, because remember, we tax in arrears.
Right.
So in 23, you're taxing on 22 values. So stuff building right now, like Quick Trip, for example, let's say they complete in 23, we won't see that till 25, because in 24, they'll tax for 23.
Now, back to the tax abatements, an additional 294,982 of assessed valuation will be added
Sorry.
to our tax rolls from the NRP. That's already factored into your 24 budget, correct?
What's coming back on in 24?
What's coming back on?
Yes,
in
I believe
24?
so. Yeah,
Is
yes, sir.
that factored
No.
in?
Oh, it's
Because
not?
I don't figure that in. I go off the mill levy, the assessed valuation that he gave me for 24, so I'm going off the mill levy that he's told me.
Okay.
So that won't be in
Yeah.
till
Figured
25.
in your 1 or 2% increase, whatever.
I think 2% is what we were putting in there. Because historically, it's been 1.5 to 2% typically. Like I said, this 10% was a catch-up from like 4 or 5 years in a row.
We might pick up 1 or 2 mills with what's
We might.
Yeah,
being
I don't
built
know.
right now.
I don't ever
of
count.
We
new-
very well could.
Of new valuation.
I think it just depends on how fast some of these
Yeah,
other residential and commercial industrial projects roll out. And I know, just like us, they're having supply chain issues. That's been the major holdup on a lot of these projects, is they're like, we just can't get the steel or the generator or not generator, what's what I'm looking for? Evergy's, Transformers.
Transformers, yeah.
I mean, Transformers Evergy's told us 18, 24 months out. And they're going to these developments in other communities that have gone silent and taking old Transformers and bringing them to the new developments because they're playing catch up too, just like everybody else. So that is something, again, one of these factors just outside of our control.
Yeah.
Heating and air units, crazy, can't get them.
You can't get them. God forbid your air conditioning goes out this summer
We
because
have 2 of them at the church that need replaced, can't,
you're in trouble,
just without,
especially commercial units.
yeah, just without.
Well, I think one thing that's important is a lesson learned in not going all those years. And we have said that we realize we should have done that. So I think there's a part of me that says bringing a breath of relief to our citizens with no tax increase. On the other hand, there's a part of me that says we need to start now doing what we said we knew we should have done. And that is just even a mill planning for the future. I know it's not much, but it shows due diligence in looking at the future. I was wondering about 1.5 mills as far as those 2 positions are concerned. Would that not take care of just those 2 positions? It would probably.
They would cover those.
And then we also don't know what will happen with sales tax. We have to think, well, okay, and then we don't know the valuations. Hopefully we could be pleasantly surprised. Again, next year, we don't know. But at least we do know how important I think it is to keep those 2 positions. So if we could even look at look at 1.5 mills and not allow that to be a cut for 2024. I don't know what.
Well, it seems like 2.5 mills would take care of that 368,452, right? You
As
said
far
it's
as
100
the total cuts,
total cuts, yeah.
Yeah, be
yeah,
close,
2.5
real close.
probably would. Do we
Before.
want to not make any of those cuts? I definitely do not want to make the 2 position cuts.
Yeah, well, and just recall, we have made, I mean, as we were trying to remind you guys, we have made so many cuts over the years. You get to a point where you can't cut yourself out of it anymore.
Yeah, and
It's a
I
revenue
think the
issue.
demolition fund is still important to keep putting money in there, because we've talked about that over the past year and a half, and
And
you
the
know,
price of that
it's
continues
getting more
to
expensive.
increase, yeah, because it used to cost us, $8,000 or $10,000, and now it's
I mean, I guess
15 to
the,
20,000 for a single home to remediate, and we may or may not get any of that back, but it is, what's the trade-off if then if we have a clean lot, we can
Yeah.
resell through the land bank or something?
and the 70,000, I guess, that's just a move from one, that's still getting paid, so that's 298,452, which is, I mean, that's 2 mills would cover that. You said they were 153?
152 is the mill,
152,
152.8,
so-
yeah.
Yeah,
So
158.
2 mills would cover all of that,
Mm-hmm.
and that 70,000 is just getting transferred from somewhere else.
Yeah. And I do feel like the movements I've made between funds are all,
Oh, but the picnic
Appropriate.
thing too, this is the one. Okay.
Yeah, the picnic tables, and yeah.
that's
And the
thir-
street slurry
this-
fill thing, I think is still important to keep in, so.
well,
It is, I mean, it extends to life, and
Well,
I
the
was
other
looking at the wrong
thing
slide on here, but yeah, this one.
that I would add is we are in the process of switching up and changing our maintenance areas. And we are we're adding 1 year to the mix already before we even look at the costs, because Area 1 has grown and grown and grown as we've developed to the south, and we can't get all of that done in a year. So we're having to split that out, which means we extend everything. Instead of we hit you every 7th year, we hit it every 8 years. And that's just going to mean that stuff falls apart more. So we're reviewing all of that now as we go.
and Commissioner Schmidt,
And
that's something
depending
we
on
can
how this
review.
falls, we're just trying to look at all of the pieces of it all at once.
So it's 2.57 mils if it's the 393,184,
So
if my math is right.
how much of I guess, a difference would it make by moving just 1 mil from the bond and interest fund? And then, and here's what I'm thinking of. Rich made a comment a while ago about, the community has kind of suffered through the increases, and not to mention just all of the inflation issues. And we've talked about, I know I have talked, I'm sorry, you can't hear.
Pull it closer to.
I'm sorry.
Just a little
Okay.
bit harder.
Okay. I appreciated Rich's comment earlier about what the communities had to go through with the increase, and then not to mention just inflation costs. So I'm thinking, okay, what if, it doesn't sound like it would hurt too much to move 1 mil over?
I can do that as well. We can look at
1
that.
mil over and then 1.5 mil. So in other, to cover the, you know.
Yeah, so you're
cover-
talking about a 2.5 mil total increase, or not increase, but to the general fund, but one of those would come from the bond and interest fund as a transfer.
Yes.
And then the actual only mill levy increase would be 1.5, am I?
Because
that
I
right?
think I think it would be important message to send to our community. To do what we said we know we need to do over the years. As you're planning, you think of 5-year plans, 10-year plans, you need to plan for those, so you do little bits at a time. I think it would behoove us now to turn around and start small.
Sure.
And not, you know, to some people, that 2.5 mil, or that is going to be, here you go again. I understand it, but I can already tell how some folks are going to respond.
Sure.
I think we're having to consider both sides of the coin now, the community response and what they have gone through with the increases in that versus what really, you know, realism is. I mean, that's where it is. And just planning. I don't really like the thought of those cuts. And so I think maybe that might be a little bit easier way, a softer way, soften that blow by maybe transferring over 1 mil and then figuring out what we need to do as a actual mill levy increase. I don't know what
I'd
the
be
rest of
happy to
you
get
think.
you any option you guys want to look at. We
Yeah,
can
I
give you
wouldn't mind
multiple
seeing
options.
that. I want to know what a 1 mil increase would do to the taxes on a $100,000 house.
The other thing that I know a lot of my colleagues are talking about right now, even locally, we have a standing meeting of like all the city administrators and the county administrator, and then through council of governments, like mayor goes with me. And one of the things we all discussed was the importance of not becoming dependent as we did before on interest income on our idle funds, because, you know, we used to get $700,000-800,000 a year from those interest income funds. And then during the pandemic, that went to like literally $5,000 in a year. And we had been dependent on that which is, it's good to diversify. We always want to do that. But like, as the interest rates go up right now and we're seeing those increases on our investment income, but it's such a fluctuating market that, again, we don't have control over. But same with sales tax. That's the reality. We like to diversify. We don't ever want to put all our eggs in one basket. But we have to just be cognizant that that is something very much out of our control. And so we need to not be reliant upon that to fill the entirety of the gap.
No, I would agree. I think I'm just sitting here looking for a way this year to move in that direction that we know we need to move, how we need to move. And going from 8, I think, to as soft as we can do it.
And that's something we have heard for years, even long before my time in the community, whether it was utility rates or taxes, is please, let's do these small incremental increases versus the big hit all at once. And all of this, of course, as you guys know, everything's been compounded by, you know, the pandemic and the recession and the inflation, again, things we had no control over. So, you know, the best laid plans of mice and men, right? So, but we can only do our best to try and continue to be fiscally sound and very responsible as well.
What are your thoughts on the preserving revenue items that we talked about? We'd mentioned it previously about the building permit fee increase.
And recall, we gave you several options, a 10, 15, and a 20, and even at 20%, we still weren't as high as the highest of comparable communities.
If that's something that you're in consensus on, it's something we could bring now.
It's an ordinance we could put in place, and we could give even months' notice and say, hey, it'll go into effect in September or January 1 or whatever, whatever you would advise.
Do the 5 of us feel like that 15% is sufficient, or shall we go up to 20% on the permit fees?
And just like everything else, you're going to get pushback. just be prepared.
We gave you a 15 or 20% options, and that's still, we were not clear to the top on the highest. And that was based on where people were at here a few months
yeah.
ago. I don't know who's increased since then. And you had suggested as a group 15%.
Okay.
But
Well, that's a start.
Yeah, I think I'm still good with 15, just 20% high to do all at once.
Okay, sounds good.
15.
Well, we can get an ordinance ready for that if you'd like. And then the next bullet down, the reductions and waivers of permit fees. I mean, we kind of have set a precedent in that in the past. We've done smaller ones in the past and kind of reimbursed ourselves, like for Habitat for Humanity, those kind of things. And those are in the $1,800 to $2,000 range because, again, we felt like, and I believe you all did, felt like that is something that benefits the most needy in our community, the most that,
Does that
most in
include all
need.
the, like, festivals and stuff, or not festivals, but just all the different events that we provide?
It
picnic
could be.
tables and barricades?
It could be. We have prices for all that, and
Because I don't think I've seen one that people pay for since I've been here.
not that I know of, because once you give them the option that you guys can waive those fees, they do. So that also includes things like, we've had some extensive discussion recently about right-of-way and permitting fees. And to Suzanne's point, just like comping the building permit fees, we are currently comping the right-of-way fees and those kind of things, because we never want to be the highest of the high, and we want to be developer-friendly, but we also know that that entails our costs,
Speaking of, I mean, there's significant costs for all those barricades and stuff to go up for every little
Oh my
thing
gosh, yes.
someone wants to do.
Yes, there are. And we have numbers
Saturdays
for all
and
of that.
Sundays and everything else.
Do we have the numbers? Because I asked a couple years ago, do we keep an accounting of our goodwill and what we give away? And
yeah, we started and then didn't keep up because everybody was checking.
right.
They wanted it for free. We could go back and get that accounting for sure. And, we can talk both sides of that, because living in a community like Newton, some of the great things are the festivals that we
Yeah.
have.
Yeah.
And
We don't
so-
want to deter that at all.
Yeah.
But those
Yeah.
types of numbers don't have to be used to penalize somebody. It can also be used to tout the goodwill.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
here's your
that's
in-kind donation, basically, of the staff
Yeah.
time, the cost of the
Yeah.
facilities, whatever that might be.
That's right.
Yeah, we can sure get that for you. Any thoughts on the last one about, we've had this policy in place for many a year about, the city's contributions, and some of these are negotiated one-off, like Quick Trip, and because it was a unique situation where that intersection has needed to be signalized for a number of years, and we were just kind of waiting on the traffic counts to come up, and they graciously agreed to partner with that. That's part of a development agreement, but to Suzanne's comment about we have a standing policy about we pay for the intersections. I mean, as the community is growing pretty rapidly, is that something we need to continue? Has that been helpful towards that growth? Or, and I don't know the answer to this, I guess I'm throwing it out there as a policy question, or is that a cost-saving measure because we know how much growth is coming right now in these newer housing developments especially,
Is
so.
that pretty typical for most communities of our size to pay for intersections?
I think it really varies.
Okay.
It varies.
And in 1 year, it might be one intersection, and in 1 year, it could be 10 intersections. I think that's the hard part, especially as we're hitting growth mode like we are now. So that's just something to consider.
You spread it amongst the lots, though.
We do not, we pay, the city at large.
But you would if we.
Yes, yes, that would be the alternative, yes, sir.
So it'd be.
Or the developer could pay for it all in
additional
cash.
cost Divided by the lots.
Yes, sir, yep.
Yep.
It would be
over
added
a
to the specials.
15-year period.
20.
Up to 20.
Whatever the developer chooses, 10, 15,
Yeah,
or 20.
that's,
Most of them choose 20
Yeah.
here lately.
I wouldn't think that would kill a project
I don't either.
if we.
And there are some communities that don't do it at all. It's just a policy question for you all. And
The other thing we do that makes sense, that I'm not sure we should do away with, is when we have a water line or sewer line that is going to be serving a development, but we would like to upsize it because we want it to be large enough to get to the next one, then we pay for the difference over 8-inch.
like if we need a 12-inch, they pay for the 8 just like they normally would, and then we pay that difference. And I totally agree.
Makes sense.
I mean, especially as the community's growing, we need to be prepared for that growth.
What about these intersections again? Do you have a typical cost for what one of those costs?
Not on the top of my head, no.
I mean, is it 150,000 more or less?
That might be close.
And then,
Oh, it's going to be less than that for a residential intersection.
Yeah, commercial would be larger. Like, think about First and Spencer, like we're talking
Yeah.
about versus,
Yeah.
you know,
And the
in
pavement
Mr.
type's different.
I was just wondering if we could meet somewhere in the middle and pay half of it and the developer pays half, or, I mean, at least that's,
Sure.
We could do a little bit, if you're interested in that, let us do a little bit of
Yeah,
looking
do
and
that.
we'll bring something to you on that.
Do we have a lot of intersections we paid for in the past where there haven't been houses built that would help reimburse the cost of the intersection? You hate to just build intersections and then.
Have a development go silent, to your
Yeah,
point,
so,
yeah.
so if there was some way you could say, okay, if there's 10 houses built in the first 2 years, then, yeah, but of course, you're bonding that and you don't
You
know
gotta
what
pay
that
for it
number's
now.
gonna be.
Yeah,
It goes on
Yeah.
city at large immediately.
yeah.
Yeah.
Let us do a little bit of looking and we'll bring you back
Yeah,
some more
okay.
details on that.
does that answer most of your questions and
Yeah,
give you
I
a
was
path forward?
Just making sure here.
And then there's the development policy that Beth is pushing for us all to get together. That's something that I know
Yeah.
Rebecca's really been working on. So we can bring that to you in the
I
next
think
coming.
that's a great idea.
And that will also need to go through not just the EDC Board of Directors, but also Choose Newton, the Community Development Commission, before it would come to you all. But anytime we can get more in line with, and make things standardized for developers, whether it's in the county especially, that is so helpful. It's so helpful to Beth and Zach to go out and be able just to sell,
It is.
Yeah.
whatever the incentive might be. It's very, very helpful. And it makes the developers' lives easier too, because they know what they're walking into.
Great. This has been a good discussion, guys. Thank you.
Yeah.
We need help. Decisions.
Yes.
So you need to know about another budget work session.
Yeah,
Yes.
I had
Yeah.
sent you 3 tentative dates,
did?
week after next to hold if you wanted one or all of them. And that would give us enough time to do some
Yeah,
research on
that'd be
some
the
of these
last week
items.
I've
into-
held all 3, so it doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, and I think and I put them first thing in the morning because that's kind of what you guys had told me, but if lunchtime's better, just let us know.
So when you sent that out?
Yes, ma'am, it would be, I sent out the 26th, 27th, or 28th as options, which are Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, if not next week, but the following week.
8 to 10, right?
Yes, sir, I said 8 to 10. I mean, if it doesn't take that long, that's
Yeah.
totally okay. That just gives us a little time to do this research and get something put together for you. Is there a particular day that's better for everybody?
I'm sorry, on which days?
Sir, it would be 26, 27, 28, Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. And I thought that's when you were back in town. It wasn't
Yeah,
possible.
I am, yep.
I think that's why we picked those dates initially, but,
Any 3 of them work for me.
Yeah, any 3 in the
and we
morning?
figured, we know a couple you have to
Yeah,
get to
8 to
work,
10.
so we thought first in the morning was easier to.
Yeah, that's easier for me than lunchtime is.
Okay.
Yeah, 8 to 10.
Wednesday works better for me.
Wednesday would be the best, but
Sure.
Monday and Tuesday work well too, but I'm just thinking of.
Okay.
Wednesday
good.
works fine for me.
Wednesday?
Wednesday works for me.
Okay,
yeah.
so
So
we're
Okay. 8
Wednesday,
o'clock?
the 28th?
8 o'clock on the 28th.
Okay, got it.
So Monday and Tuesday is,
I will take those off. I'll send you a cancellation notice,
Okay.
'cause I think I sent you calendar appointments
yeah, you did.
for those who use Outlook. Okay, so,
It says hold.
yep, and that's why I said hold it, because I wasn't sure.
Hold it.
Hold your horses, you know?
Hold.
And if you think of something when you're thinking this over later on and you want me to bring some more information, be sure to shoot me an email or something and I can have it at that meeting as well.
So
Right.
you'll see stuff from me this afternoon. You'll see 2, just so don't freak out, but you'll see 2 cancellation notices for Monday, Tuesday. And then I'll go ahead and send a third that'll be not just hold, but confirmed for
Okay.
Wednesday, the 28th. That way it's on your schedules. And
So-
if anybody's not using Outlook, let me know if there's a better format.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give some forecast on the 2.5 meals for general. Is that what everybody wanted to see?
I
And
think
then,
that was Clint's
and then
suggestion.
move one from bonded interest, so I'd have two new forecasts on each one of those
So
to
like
see what that looked like. Is that what?
Put on the top of it Clint's proposal.
Yeah, put it in big bold letters.
2.5, and then just, so you'll do one on 2.5 mil increase and then one on a 1.5 mil increase?
Or it'll actually be, do you want that to be 3.5 to actually going into general though?
No, two.
No.
2.5.
2.5.
So
so-
1.5,
total.
1.5 increase total,
Right, with
and
one,
a
another
transfer
coming over,
from
so we
one.
get
Yeah.
2.5.
Gotcha.
right,
general.
right. So you do it 2 ways,
Do
either.
you need help
good one.
spelling his name? It's CLING.
They're going to get some mileage out of this one.
And then,
I might as well take it for the team if I'm not on the ballot next year, so. You guys can all just blame me. It was Clint's fault.
and you want to know what it looks like on different size houses, how much it increases.
Yes.
And I do have something on that, but I'm going to check all my numbers to make sure it's right before I
Yeah,
hand it out.
it's like
Yep.
11 and a
Yep.
half.
And we usually give you like a couple of options, like $100,000, 150, 200, 250, something like that. What that would look like.
Sounds good.
What else? Anything else that we didn't capture there?
And if you think it's something, call us, text us, email us, whatever, we'll get it together. Just, we want to give you what you need to make a good, solid, feel-good, educated decision.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you.
Good work,
Yeah.
all of you.
It's been a stressful few years, I'm not going to lie. Between the pandemic and the financial
We got
difficulties.
2 more years, I think, of really tough number of games.
Yeah, but there's
There's a light at the end.
some light at the end of the
Coincidentally,
tunnel.
Rod, you're on for another 2 years.
I know. Yeah.
So when you leave, it gets easy.
I bet it does, yeah. You'll have to talk to me more then. I still have on here lunch Wednesday with Clint. You never show up.
I know. It's life.